this sound okay? Okay. All right. As some of you know, we've been kind of taking turns here with the Wednesday night class, and we're going through this book, Why I'm a Member of the Church of Christ. And so I was kind of given the direction to pick out some lessons from that book. It's got several chapters in it. And the one that I have for tonight is maybe chapter 2. It's reason number 2, because it was founded on the scriptural foundation. So we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. Before we get going, though, I'd like to get some volunteers to read some verses. And if I could just get that done before we get going, that way we don't have to take a break to do it during the class. So can I get somebody to read? Not right now. I'll just go around and give out all the verses, and then I can let you know when to read them. Matthew 16, 16 through 18. Somebody? Thank you, sir. Let's see. Galatians chapter 1, 1 through 8. They won't necessarily be in this order, but 1 Corinthians 3:11. Okay, Chuck, thank you. Ephesians 2:20. Okay, Psalms 118, 22. Okay, Matthew 21:42. And Acts 4:11. All right, thank you very much. Okay, so we will get into the foundational stuff here in a little bit. But before we do that, can you go ahead and put the picture up? Okay. Okay. This very scary-looking man right here, his name is Alexander Karelin. He's a former Russian Greco-Roman wrestler. You might have guessed by looking at him. He was born in 1967. He was about 6'3" and weighed about 285 pounds. He's considered the greatest Greco-Roman wrestler of all time. Not only is he that, but you might have a hard time finding anybody in the modern era of any sport that dominated his sport to the level that this guy did. He won gold medals at the 1988, 92, 96 Olympics. He won a silver in 2000, and it was a huge deal when he lost. He went undefeated in 13 years in international competition. People talk about Michael Phelps and how great he was, and he was absolutely great, but he lost. This guy went for 13 years without losing. He went 6 years without giving up a single point. That's pretty amazing. His record was 887 wins and 2 losses. In wrestling, when you get to the world level like this, it's not easy to score points. A lot of the matches are very close and they're low scoring. It might be a 2-1 or something like that, because it's not easy to score. At the 1990 World Championships, and it's even harder to get a pin. In high school wrestling, you see it all the time. Guys are getting pinned. But when you get to this level against world-class people, it's not easy to just go out and throw somebody on their back and pin them. 1990 World Championships, he pinned his opponents in 1:35, 1:07, 1:21, 26 seconds, 2 minutes and 58 seconds, and 2 minutes and 50 seconds. He had a move. He had some nicknames: Russian Bear, Alexander the Great, the Experiment, which makes sense. He had a move that was called by different names, called the reverse body lift or the Karelin lift. And it had been a similar version of it had been done by other people, but nobody did it like he did at that weight class, because it's not easy to pick somebody that weighs 286 pounds up off the ground. It's one thing to lean over and pick up a weight off the ground that weighs 285 pounds. But for starters, it's this far off the ground to start off with, because that's where the bar is. These guys are trying to glue themselves to the ground and not get lifted up. Plus, they're fighting and doing everything they can to not get picked up. this guy would reach down, grab them, pick them up off the ground, and throw them. And people were so scared that they would actually roll over on their back and let him pin them to avoid getting in this move. He was able to do 42 pull-ups, which is pretty remarkable for a guy that weighs what that guy weighed. Anyway, so enough about him. You look at a guy like that, and you look at all the accolades, all the great things that he did, all the accomplishments that he had, and the highlight reel you could watch on him with the reverse body lifts, them throwing world-class athletes through the air on their head, and things like this. But he had to start from somewhere. He didn't just start off. I don't know what his first day of wrestling practice was like, but I'm guessing that he didn't walk in and do that move on his first day of wrestling practice. He didn't get to that. You have to start off with the basics. You got to start off with the foundation. Before you can get to where you're grabbing guys and throwing them up in the air, you got to figure out how to do a lot more mundane stuff like, hey, here's how you stand. You got to stand this way. You got to keep where you're putting your hands, where you're keeping your elbows, all this kind of stuff. He didn't start off doing 42 pull-ups. He started off with 0 pull-ups. And he worked up to that because he built this foundation. He had this good, solid foundation to build from. And that's part of what allowed him to accomplish just the crazy amount of the things that he did. And so you need a foundation. You need a solid foundation to build from. It's true of sports. It's true of, in school, like with math, for example. You don't just start off doing calculus. You don't just start off doing algebra. You got to learn your numbers. You got to learn to add and subtract. You got to learn that kind of stuff. You got to learn in reading. You got to learn your letters before you just start reading everything. Common example is a building. We think of a foundation. You got to have a solid foundation to build from, because if you don't have that, then what's on top of that foundation could all come crashing down and really not be worth a whole lot of anything. So, the importance of a good foundation. That's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight. I'm reading directly from the lesson here. It's a recognized fact that no building or institution can be stronger than the foundation on which it rests. Strength of either, you can take that picture down. The strength of either is directly dependent on the foundation. The scriptural church must have the scriptural foundation, otherwise it would not be scriptural. Thus, no man can consistently claim membership in the scriptural church unless he's a member of the church founded upon the scriptural foundation. So, we need to figure out what the church is founded on. What is the rock or foundation that the church was built on? Built on Jesus, right? Can I get, like it says here, to determine the identity of the rock, we must determine the confession to which it refers. Can we get Matthew 16 through 18, please? Okay, so there's some disagreement in the religious community over what this means about what the church was built on. What do you all think the church was built on? Because it sounds like if you read this, first glance, it sounds like maybe he's talking about Peter. Is that what it is? Can anybody think of a denomination that teaches that? Okay, the Catholic Church, that's what they believe. They believe it's Peter. Now, I am not really definitely not a Greek scholar, probably not any kind of a scholar, but, and to tell you the truth, sometimes when I probably don't, when I hear the discussions about the the different meanings of different words in the Greek. That's not my. I'm not always probably as interested in that as I should be. However, that doesn't mean that that's right. It's necessary to understand some of this stuff sometimes to figure out what the real meaning is. So if you look at this, if you look at these words, he says, "Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church." Well, there's a word. The word for Peter is Petros, and the word for rock is Petra. And let's see here. So now the word Petros, that's masculine. Petra is feminine. Petros is masculine. To try to kind of help make sense of this, with a similar sentence to this, it'd be like if somebody said, you look at the words actor and actress, okay, instead of Petra and Petra, or Petros and Petra. Like they said, you are the actor, and with this actress, I'll make my movie. Okay, they're talking about making the movie with the actress. Well, again, Petra, but upon the rock, or Petra, instead, that's what God's going to build his church on. And just coming at it from kind of another maybe point of view or another angle, what makes more sense just from a common sense standpoint? Does it make more sense that God would? Now, I don't want to knock Peter. First of all, I really like Peter. I think Peter. Of course, he did some great things, and I can identify with Peter because Peter was always messing up. He did a bunch of good stuff, then he'd go back and he'd mess up again and he'd do something wrong. But he always kept coming back and he kept trying. So I really admire Peter and I really like Peter. But what does it make more sense on that? If you had the foundation, if you're building if you're building off of something for your foundation for the church, does it make more sense that you're going to build it off of a flawed individual like Peter, or you're going to build it off somebody that's got no flaws like Jesus Christ? Peter's got those little cracks in him. Like if you compare it to a foundation, Peter would be like a foundation that has some cracks in it. It's pretty solid, very solid, really. Actually, I think, but he had some cracks, like all of us do. And but Jesus, there's no cracks there. He's solid all the time, and that's what the church was built on. It wasn't built on Peter. Now he made some contributions. I'm not saying that he didn't. Of course he did, but it's Jesus that the church is built on. We go to the Church of Christ, not the Church of Peter. So anyway, other passages will lend to support this. We get 1 Corinthians 3:11, please. Okay, and Ephesians 2:20. Okay, Psalms 118:22. Okay, thank you. Matthew 21:42. Thank you. Okay, any questions, comments about any of that? If I say something wrong, please tell me. Anybody got anything at this point? Okay. All right. Okay, part 3 of this. This foundation will stand. The sublime foundation that Christ is the Son of God has stood and will continue to stand. Can we get, let's see. Continue a little bit from there. Infidels, atheists, modernists, and skeptics have raved and ranted, but Christ remains the Son of the living God. This rock may truly be compared to an anvil that has worn out many hammers. The foundation stands as securely and firmly as ever today. So there's been a lot of attacks on the church, a lot of challenges to the church, a lot of challenges to Christianity. So what I want to do right now is I want to give, and you guys can come up with your own, but what I'd like to do is give you a few minutes and just form into some small groups, and they can be as small as you want. It's up to you. And you can just have a little, give you a few minutes to have your own discussion within your group about some of the challenges that the church is facing, that Christianity is facing. And then when we get done with that, after 5 minutes or so, we'll come back and we'll go around and we'll talk about some of the different things that you came up with. So it can be persecution, it can be things the apostles face, it can be things that the church is looking at today, whatever you want it to be. But let's take about 5 minutes, and again, it can be 2 of you, it can be 10 of you. It's whatever you want it to be. And we'll do that, and then we'll come back and we'll have a little group discussion about that. So go ahead. Why? What do you think? Oh. What's that? But, oh yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, he just made. No, I had a vision, and no, he didn't. He might have had a delusion, but that's about it. Yeah, that was one of the things that I was looking Okay, we'll take about one more minute. Or maybe not. I don't know. Okay, we think we're ready to go. Okay, it looks like we have several groups, so we should have some different topics to come up. So, uh, Jack, would you like to start with what you all talked about? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It, yeah, it will, and it's already has been. I went to it's been several years ago now, more than several years ago, but one day it was on a Sunday, and Tori and I were going to go to an A's game, and so we stopped over in San Leandro, and went into the Church of Christ there. That's what it was labeled as anyway. And we went in, and they had women up there to serve the communion. It wasn't really what we were expecting. And, anyway, yeah, we ended up leaving, and I actually um, wrote a letter, sent an email or something over there to the Church of Christ there, and anyway, I did finally get something back from them, and they didn't they didn't really care for what I wrote to them apparently, but really, wow. Yeah. So that's another thing. Again, if it's back to the spiritual foundation. That's what back to the, I'm sorry, the scriptural foundation. Um, you have to go back to this to see what's what, because um, if you leave us as humans to our own devices, we're always going to make the right choices, because sometimes we want to make choices that benefit us, even though they're not really the right choices, and we kind of need some guidance. And I think Charles said the other day, we was talking about the Bible, was it basic instructions before leaving Earth? And we need those sometimes, you know. What else? I don't know. I mean, anybody. It doesn't have to be you, but uh, Charles. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's the way it goes. I mean, the media. Um, if you're you can be anything you want. You can be Muslim. You can be all kinds of stuff, and that's all fine and well. But if you come across, if you're claim to be a Christian, now you're a hater. You're intolerant. You're all these things, and it's really, it's kind of funny. The some of the liberal people that think they're liberal at least are just so intolerant of anybody with a different view than they are. Liberal's supposed to be accepting of many things. They're accepting of it as long as it agrees with them. But when you don't agree with them, now it's your problem. They're not the problem. You're the problem because you don't share the same viewpoint as they do. And just because, and all it has to be, it doesn't have to be that you hate people or anything like that. We don't teach that here. But if you know of somebody that is doing something wrong, I know a guy from work that I found out that, and I've been friends with him for years. Well, he got divorced not that long ago, and now he's living with a man. I mean, I still like the guy, I still care about him, but I can't expect me to say that what he's doing is right. It's not right. That doesn't mean that we should be mean to people or we should call people names or all this kind of stuff. But just by not condoning or by saying that something is wrong, we get that label. Oh, you're judging. Like, listen, you all know how that verse goes too. Oh, who are you to judge? You're not. Listen, we're not here to judge people. That's up to God. But what we can do, some of you remember Ron Brotherton. What did he say? Something about not judging, but I'm a fruit inspector. Yeah. I mean, hey, what you're doing. Okay, I don't know all that's going on with your life and your backstory, but what you're doing is wrong, and we're allowed to do that. That's what we're supposed to do. So yeah, just because we're not just willing to go on with anything, we catch the heat for that sometimes. Anybody else? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's a. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 That's something that we all need to be aware of. It's easy to get caught up in that, and this has been talked about not too long ago too. Everything that we get, does it really belong to us? No, it's not really us. We're being given that by God to be stewards of it. So we need to not get caught up in material things. The rich young ruler, he had all this stuff and then dead. What good did it do him? Yeah. You care to expand on that at all? Mm-hmm. Yeah, everybody's kid's going to be a big leaguer these days. I don't know. But yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. This stuff and these things, these ideas that come from men, they are not going to be, they're not, things that come from men, they tend to be flawed, and they're not something to build a foundation on. You look at things that come from men, for example, like, for one, some of the other different religions out there. For one, like Islam. I looked at this article. It was by a guy, Dr. Robert Jeffries. According to the article, Islam's a false religion. It's based on a false book. The Quran was written by Muhammad over a 20-year period, and not one single prophecy in the Quran has ever been fulfilled. Not one piece of archaeological evidence can confirm anything in the Quran. Islam was written by a false prophet. Muhammad beheaded 600 Jews because they wouldn't follow him into battle. He had sex with little girls and took them as wives. That's all according to that article that was written by this man. And yet, they're going to trust that guy to follow. That guy's the prophet that you probably don't want to trust that guy. I don't know, it's me, but that doesn't really seem like a guy that I'd want to follow. According to the Quran, Christ, the son of Mary, was no more than a messenger. Christians call Christ the son of Allah. Allah is cursed beyond them. How are they deluded away from the truth? They do blaspheme who say Allah is one of the three in a Trinity. That's all translated from the Quran. These ideas that come from men, they're not going to work. Joseph Smith, hey, I saw a vision. I'm out in the woods and I saw this vision, and here's what's wrong with Christianity. Who had Galatians 1-8? Can you read that? And let's pay particular attention to verse 8. Okay, so Paul's writing this letter to the Galatians, and the last verse there, but even if we are an angel from heaven, should preach a gospel other than the one we preach to you, let him be eternally condemned. It doesn't sound like Jesus wants something different preached than what he authorized, and Islam is not what he authorized. This nonsense that Joseph Smith's coming up with, that's not what he authorized. They are not that stuff. There might be, and there's a saying like, every good lie has got some truth in it. Okay. Yeah, otherwise you wouldn't believe it, right? There's some stuff in there. There's some. They'll use some of the Bible, but they're not going to use all of it. But they are not. You cannot rely on those religions. They're coming from men, and they are not. They are not scripturally solid, so we cannot rely on those. We can't trust men. Things that men say, they're not going to hold water. There's a guy in this next part of the book, and I didn't know who he was, so I did a little research on him. In other words, I Googled him, but referred to him as Voltaire. His real name was Francois Marie Arouet. He was a French Enlightenment writer, historian, and philosopher. He was famous for his wit and his criticism of Christianity, especially the Roman Catholic Church. So I'll go ahead and read this next part. We now notice a contradictory example. Voltaire once boastfully declared that there would not be a copy of the Bible on earth in 100 years. It has been more than 100 years since his blasphemous prophecy was given, and it is no closer to fulfillment now than it was then. The same press on which this infidel prophecy was issued is now being used by the Geneva Bible Society. What a prophecy. So, in spite of all these things that are going on, in spite of all the persecution, the church is still, the church is still around. I got this thing here that I found, and I will try to hit some highlights real quick. Nine things you should know about global persecution of Christians. And it's got it broken down by location. North Korea. Because the North Korean government associates Christianity with the despised West, particularly the United States, they single out Christians as the greatest religious threat. They utilize a sophisticated surveillance apparatus to actively pursue and imprison Christians practicing their faith in secret. Let's go to China. Let's see, your Bible may have been rewritten by the Chinese government, your church shuttered or demolished, and your pastor imprisoned. The Chinese government continued to persecute all faiths in an effort to synthesize religious belief, a campaign that attempts to diminish and erase the independent practice of religion. I'm not going to read all these, but Iran. Iran has nearly 300,000 Christians, including traditional Armenian and Assyrian, Chaldean ethnic churches and newer Protestant and evangelical churches. The government monitors members of the historical churches and imposes legal restrictions on constructing and renovating houses of worship. And it goes on from there. There's several others. But in spite of all this stuff, in spite of all the persecution in different countries, in spite of all the false religion out there, in spite of all the press, the politicians, the school, prayer being taken out of schools, the Bible being taken out of schools, the Bible, it's from God. It's solid. It's from God. It's not going to go away, and that's why you can trust it. It's scriptural. It's what we believe is from the scriptures. It's sound. It's like the rock. It's there. It's solid, and we can trust it. It's not from men, and it's going to continue. It's continued for thousands of years, and it's going to continue until Jesus comes back. So, anyway, any final thoughts or comments? Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. thank you for your comments. I appreciate it.